Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We're going to talk today about the ascending trend here, the macro structure, and we still need to respect that. However, lower time frame divergences as well as potential for double top pattern here, of course, right? And then furthermore too, the Asia highs and lows that still need to be swept. Generally speaking, those are going to be hit. Either way you look at it, we were able to claim some nice profits this weekend at a good 26% on a Bitcoin short from about 81.4 to 80.350. So just caught that quick wick down. And at this point, looking for a new consideration on entry. Either way you look at it, thanks again so much for being an amazing part of my life. Be sure to stick around. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the backend data, quick reminder, please hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Join us over on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord as well. Got a lot of good resources there, specifically my X account. Things are growing really fast there, and it's probably the best way to stay on top of the current data that I provide. All right. Now, as far as the overall circumstance here, this is the 10-minute time frame, just kind of giving us some perspective on liquidation levels. There's a lot of liquidation between 80,000 and 79,000. Okay, so pretty straightforward there. These are high leverage trades. Basically, we're at what, 50, 75, and 100x leverage trades, right? So they're all pretty heavy below the price, kind of letting us know that we're in good shape here for downside potential as far as those who are considering a short position. Obviously, there's a lot of different schools of thought here. The macro trend is still bullish, so I want you to understand that. Try not to get too attached to a bearish mindset. I'm not bearish either, honestly, even though I expect the price to pull back. It's just what goes up must come down, and there's a lot more signs here now that kind of reflect that. Okay, so let's see if we can find the right chart here for us. Here we go. Obviously, I want to kind of highlight the fact that Coinbase is seeing a lot more outflows in spot versus other exchanges. That's why Coinbase Premium Index is low, and other exchanges actually tend to be buying right now. So it seems like spot accumulation for Binance and Bybit, as well as BitMEX too, which is a small one, but they basically are driving the price higher where the U.S. markets continue to sell. So why does that imbalance occur? Well, it's hard to say specifically, but it does generally show relative weakness. And to me personally, when I see a low Coinbase Premium Index, I don't really trust those kind of pumps, right? Either way you look at it, U.S. markets do have a tendency of moving the markets. That's part of the reason why I feel that way. But overall, even though we can see kind of up and down here, the overall spot volume and perpetual volume is pretty low, and that reflects the current price. So that continues lower. We're going to see that progression continue. When we look at order books, there's nothing super telling here. I took a look at this earlier. We're pretty heavy if you look at the aggregated, pretty much right there, 84,000 above, and then somewhat in the 78 to 78.5K range below, right? So nothing really to shake a stick at, but it is something worth noting. Same thing here as well with, what is it, 43 million in MicroStrategy purchase essentially today. That's really not that much. That doesn't really move the market too much. So just keep in mind all those fun, wonderful tweets that he had over the weekend were kind of humorous in a sense, kind of giving people indication we're going to pump when we really didn't. Now, obviously, he does that a lot. It's not like that matters, but sometimes he will troll the the internet, and you'll see when he posts the price will have a tendency of going up, right? Because people are expecting him to buy a bunch here. He keeps talking about it, but still he has yet to buy a lot in the 80,000 range. Interesting stuff, but nonetheless, that's kind of something you want to pay attention to or just kind of monitor. Another thing to be aware of is just the amount of liquidation between now and, well, basically 72,000. But if we look more specifically, there's about 7 billion in liquidation as low as 76.3. So me personally, that 76 to 77K range seems like a very sensible location based on liquidation as well as previous range highs that could work as new lows. None of our previous range highs have really been tested here, right? Bitcoin rarely pulls back ever since it left 65,000 on March 31st. So at this point here, we're in a situation where, liquidation continues to pile up. The likelihoods of it getting hit is still quite high, all right? So once more, statistical favorability, we're going down on the short term. Now, macro structure, people are asking me if I see, I'm going to see 40, 50,000. I mean, while I do believe the upper 50s might be a possibility for us just to sweep those levels, I'm not really a subscriber to the 40K range. But that's just me personally. Again, it just depends on your risk tolerance or your risk appetite. Obviously, there's different strategies there for how you want to trade that. But generally speaking, I like to look for those big swings at macro highs and lows, and we're in that high range right now. 80 to 85K is kind of that level. So just be aware of that. Having said that, liquidation on the 2-week shows 77.2K and roughly 79, basically 80,000. Okay, so we got a lot of contributing factors here, kind of just pointing to the downside. Obviously, here's the ascending trend. I want to touch on this here first, so you know. Macro structure is still intact. We're over the 50 and the 20-day SMA, and we're honoring our higher low pattern. It's pretty consistent, right? So until we break that pattern, we can presume this is going to continue. That's generally the concept. So I want you to leave this conversation knowing that the structure here is still fairly bullish, and that expectations of a massive dump right away is pretty low. 80,000 is highly contested. I still think that we're going to be holding this range possibly for a lot longer, but these double tops and a lot of these kind of patterns here are letting me know that we're more likely to progress lower, right? But again, we're still honoring this ascending trend. Here's a 4-hour trend, still above the 50 and the 20-day SMA, right? So we can close in the 80K or lower range next couple of days. I think that would kind of precipitate further downside. That would make more sense, okay? Let's take a look at the backend data really quick here, more specifically with liquidation and open interest, and just kind of talk about this here. Right-hand side is open interest delta. Left-hand side is true retail long. Basically, this is just kind of a percentage of how much better today versus yesterday is on the two metrics. Now, open interest delta, it's still low, right? Basically, it's suggesting there's not a lot of large positioning or large buy orders or sell orders. In fact, yesterday with that pump and dump that we saw from 80 to 82K and then back down, that price action didn't really spark any large whale orders, right? They're low position size, which is unique. It spells to me that they were just an algorithmic trade to sweep liquidation and then back down, which is exactly what happened. But the key takeaway here is that we haven't seen much divergence here between TRL and open interest delta over the last 24 hours. They're roughly at the same place. Still pretty weak. Longs are over leveraged and whales are not buying. That's kind of the concept. So it's kind of weird to see that same consistency on a Monday, but that's kind of where we're at. 24-hour liquidation, obviously we have more to the downside. 3-day liquidation, more to the downside. Pretty much everything's pointing down here for us, with the exception of the macro. We look at the 30-day, there's still heavier liquidation above. So a sweep of 83 to 85K is still in the cards, right? So we can't rule that out, but I still think the odds of that happening is pretty low, just because there's so much lower time frame benefit to whales or market makers to push the price or to sell into those ranges to get that profit. When we look at liquidation delta, it's pretty much at break even. It's at 1 billion. You could effectively say that's zero in a lot of ways. So liquidation delta isn't really telling us too much here, and open interest is telling us that we have good support below the price action. At least, once again, the 80,000, 80,200 mark is a good solid support. Furthermore, too, if we take a look here at, don't worry about the bid to ask ratio, but if we look at whale data, we can see it's kind of jumping up and down here lately, but whales are, once again, not very active in the past 24 hours. So when I see all this data here, I'm going to respect the trend. I'm going to expect the price to go a bit higher, but on the same accord, lower timeframes, it would be way more sensible for us to sweep those lower ranges here first, right? 79 to 77,000 just makes sense. But once more, we've seen that happen a handful of times here recently because the trend itself is still continuing. So the truth here is that the macro trend is probably more important than the lower timeframes. So we want to expect the worst and hope for the best if you're a short seller, and inverse as well for a kind of a bullish market. But I do want to say that 85,000 has a lot of confluence in a lot of ways here, and it's important that that level is just one of those ranges that's going to be heavily contested, right? Because we look at previous range lows, we're getting really close to those areas. Okay, so I'll post more macro structure stuff on my social media. I know people are asking for me to do that more. I'll go ahead and do that here soon. But in the meantime, hitting this moving average here, there's a lot of confluence at about 85,000 in the current range, or 80 to 85,000 that signal this being kind of the local top. Okay, so those are just kind of my ideas there. What are yours? I'd love to hear it. Why don't you comment below and let me know. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum here. We're going to double check the important ranges that we're in. We're kind of stuck between a lot of moving averages. It's not really optimal trading conditions, but we're going to side-by-side compare Bitcoin with ETH. So left-hand side is Bitcoin. Good old heart monitor there if you missed it. There was an EKG pattern that we saw where the price wicked up, down, and back up again just to destroy anybody who took a late leverage trade over the weekend. But regardless of that fact here, we saw the same response from Ethereum, only downside further. In other words, starting to fall off a cliff here as the price pulled back to hit that low 80,000 range. So what that tells me is if Bitcoin loses 80K, ETH will probably drop and run towards that 2250 support range. So let's double check some backend data here, kind of see where we're at. The overall circumstance here is pretty straightforward. We got a lot of liquidation above and below 2450 upwards of for the upwards liquidation, and then 2250 basically for that lower range, right? So that kind of just speaks to the fact that we're in the middle of a range. Generally speaking, waiting for one of those two outliers to occur is generally the favorable trade conditions. Now, I understand the urge to want to take a long because we saw a nice little dip here, but once more, it's not really the best situation to consider along with, or just really depends on Bitcoin, obviously. I think ETH will hit 2450 if, Bitcoin hits 82, 83,000. We don't really know that's going to happen just yet though, right? We kind of got this range for Bitcoin of 82 to 80K for the moment, and it's just really not the most optimal trading condition. So sorry to sound like a broken record, but I don't recommend a trade right now. If you do end up taking a long, just know that it comes with, it should come with a stop loss that you watch closely. I wouldn't just set it and forget it, honestly, because even though upside potential is still greater right now, I think the macro structure is still decent. We're in the middle of a range, and waiting for either 2450 or 2250 would be the better call. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. All right, folks, quick look here at Solana. Just double checking some relatively important stuff here. This coin did not pull back to fill its fair value gap, and it hasn't retested its local high as a new low yet. So just be mindful, common occurrence for that to occur. We see sub 80,000 for Bitcoin, that'll probably happen. Between now and then, if Bitcoin maintains above 82,000, I think Solana will probably continue to run towards $100. And once again, that's just kind of the off the cuff, just kind of analysis there without actually diving in, but let's double check a few things here and see where we're at. So obviously we saw this little heart monitor from Bitcoin where the EKG went off and the price wicked up and down. Similar situation there, only Solana keeps retesting its local high range. So even though it is pulling back, kind of running synonymous with Bitcoin in a lot of ways, it's running up there pretty fast here today so far, just with a small increase from Bitcoin. So it leads me to believe that Solana is still pretty strong. You probably don't want to try to short against it. We tried to short it, but closed out a quick little 20% loss. It wasn't a big deal, right? Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but it's a good thing we used a stop loss in that, right? I mean, I use one on every trade, but the key takeaway is that hitting a stop loss can be your friend, right? The fact of the matter is our stop loss is at like 94 and we're in 96 range. It makes you feel good when the price keeps running after you get stopped out. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but once more, treat it like your friend and you'll be much better off. All that said, $90 to $92 is kind of that local range of support based on open interest. There's a lot of open interest there. Liquidation delta is at 2 billion, so significant amount of buying pressure. And even though there's not a ton of liquidation left above, there's still some shorts at about 98 that could get hit next. So I would not bet against this coin, even though it seems like a cherry pick, so to speak, or like an easy opportunity. It is massively overextended, and I don't really love trying to take longs in coins that are this pushed high, right? This overextended. They have a tendency of running when they want to, right? And this coin versus majority of other coins in the market is statistically more likely to go higher than lower because once more, it's just kind of one of those coins that has a pretty strong financial backing, if you will. So when the market makers want to push this price, they really do. And right now, it seems like they really want to go up with it. Okay, so I would respect the trend. Right now, the trend is up. Until that discontinues, expect it to continue. All right, those are my thoughts. What are yours? All right, folks, quick look here at SUI. And obviously, if you were watching the charts yesterday, SUI went bonkers. I think it was up to like 20, 30%, about 31% is approximate there on the day from like 105 to 140. So who knows why that happened? If you do have an understanding of the reason for that, perhaps it could have been some kind of airdrop or some random reward there. The concept here is that it pumped and now it's going to dump, but how far down is it going to go? The common retracement, by the way, folks, is usually about 50%. So this is where Fibonacci does come in handy in a lot of ways. You'll oftentimes see that halfway mark hit before the price legs up again. All right. So it's not like a consistent 100% guarantee by any stretch. I think fib levels are like 60, 70% possible, but it does increase your odds of success, right? So once again, you're kind of shooting in the dark there because SUI is such a volatile coin that it's difficult to want to bet either against it or with it. You're probably better off bidding with it now, honestly. Shorting against this coin is pretty high risk. But as we can see, the price pulled back roughly to that halfway point. It's got a fair value gap there. It's a good chance it comes down a little lower. Having said that, side by side is obviously irrelevant here. We can see that SUI is outperforming versus Bitcoin, but we want to recognize too, though, we zoom in here a little bit, last 7 or 8 hours, pretty similar price action. Okay, this looks about the same here to me. And that leads me to believe that SUI is moderately aligned with Bitcoin. So unless Bitcoin pulls back, SUI is probably going to go sideways and up, right? That's usually the best recommendation or thought process rather. When you're looking at coins like this, trying to figure out how to trade them, they're probably going to keep going in the direction that they started or that they're continuing in if the trend for Bitcoin maintains itself, right? So I'm not saying we're going to see $2 from SUI. I'm just saying that right now at this point, obviously retracement makes sense, but the coins like this move opposite of what you think would happen. So it'll probably pump one more time before it's said and done. It's just kind of par for the course. Having said all that, though, if we look at liquidation delta, we're still in the green, so that does show favorability to the upside. There's liquidation below the price at 120. I'd be surprised we don't see a wick down to 120 before the price goes up, just based on that being kind of that heavy range of open interest, but also there's that fair value gap there too, right? Right around 123 to 120. So I think a little bit of a wick down would make sense, and then right back up again. It's kind of how these coins perform. Exact same thing happened here too with this pump. People like, oh, we're going to short, and then just boom, everyone got destroyed. That probably happened because of a short squeeze. There's a good chance a lot of shorts got squeezed out there, not expecting anything over that 110, 115 mark. So anyways, those are just some kind of things there to be mindful of. Just be careful trading this coin. That's the easy way to understand it. All right, folks, quick look here at XRP, and obviously XRP is looking pretty strong here, maintaining above that 145 range. So the good chance here of further upside for XRP, but we want to double check kind of side by side and do our due diligence and just make sure we're not, loosely taking a trade. Obviously, if we compare this with Bitcoin, it's doing much better in the last 12 hours. So we can kind of see price, kind of a little bit of a U shape. Bitcoin just kind of maintaining its local little range where XRP is already broken its local range. So that's a good sign, showing a lot of strength. It incentivizes you to want to long versus take a short. When you see this kind of price action, even though it feels weird to want to take a long at what feels like kind of a high or a local top, you're statistically more likely to find profit going to the upside than trying to short against it. Because once more, unless Bitcoin were to drop past 80,000, XRP is probably going to go higher. Okay, that's the presumption we need to go under. So even though I'm leaning more towards Bitcoin short-term going down, the macro structure is looking pretty solid for XRP to go up, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at there. Liquidation delta's in the green, 145, 140 is that area of open interest, and there's no real liquidation above. Yes, there's some at 137 below, but we're a long ways from that. I wouldn't expect that anytime soon. So taking a look at just the lower time frames here, once more, we had this consistent number of 145 that was kind of heavily contested. XRP had a lot of trouble getting past that level. And what it's done since then is it's actually bullishly backtested that level. So this next leg up is actually going to have more strength because it already hit this range. So if I were to see the price pull back a little bit further, I would be interested in getting in around 145 to 146 because that would put us in a pretty strong little triangular pattern, and the breakout potential there is quite high. Okay, so we'd be able to see that pivot and that bounce off that local range low of 145. So if we see 145 to 146 for XRP and Bitcoin doesn't look like it's going to break 80,000, I think it's going to be a solid trade to the upside. Once more, it feels kind of weird to take a long at what feels like the top, but there's no doubt that XRP looks like it's ready to break out. Okay. Once more, you want to treat all these trades with respect, low leverage, low position size if possible. Make sure you always use a trailing stop loss too, and try not to just get too gung ho with your trades. Stick to isolated versus cross margin. A lot of things that you want to kind of make sure to be responsible with. Either way, XRP has my tentative vote for further upside. I hope that makes sense to you. Make sure you join us over at cryptocash.tech. Links down below for that. Obviously, we got a lot of new members coming over. Make sure you reference basically our Trading Academy community or Signals group. And just to clarify too, we did have some nice profits here yesterday from our Bitcoin position there, about 25% in 3 hours. We took a short from 81.4 to 80.2K, and it worked out fairly well. Caught that quick wick down and right back up. It's exactly why you use a trailing stop loss and close out your trades instantly. It's pretty much the safer bet nowadays. Either way, best of luck to you on your trades. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day.